Welcome to the once proud city of Garlemald. My name's Rook, but today I'll be your tour guide through one of Final Fantasy XIV's new open-world zones, Garlemald, waiting for you to roam its desolate streets on November 23rd in the upcoming expansion, Endwalker. Warning, this video contains explicit spoilers for the pre-Endwalker events of Final Fantasy XIV. We are the Hand. We are the God.
Nos sumus manus, nos sumus Deus.
Garlemald, the once proud jewel of the Garlean Empire, is situated in the remote regions of one of the three great continents known as Ilsabard. The imperial capital overcame the natural disadvantages of its location through the development and weaponization of magitech. They used this technology to subjugate the other races and lay claim to nearly 3/4 of the continents, following in the footsteps of the Garlean Empire. Yet, until some 50 years ago, Garlemald was a small, remote republic, which held little more than a fraction of the Northlands. The Garlean race's inability to use magic often caused them to be likened to the unjustly labeled lesser races or beast tribes. This imbalance of power placed the Garlemald Republic at the mercy of their enemies, so much so that they were driven from their home and into the central mountain range. After crossing the treacherous peaks, they had no choice but to settle in the bleak northern reaches of the continent, where the capital city of Garlemald would eventually rise up in defiance of their fate. With no allies and no power of their own, the Garlean people turned to one another. By maintaining a united front in the face of an unforgiving world, they were able to defy all odds and thrive through innovation. The emblem upon the Garlean flag is a chain in abstract design. It symbolizes that mentality which the native sons and daughters of Garlemald hold dear, tight unity amongst their small number. But to understand what has cast the once unified war machine of the Garlean Empire into a future of disharmony, we must turn to the past. The Garlean Empire was founded by a man named Solus Galvus. Born in the 6th Astral Era to the esteemed House Galvus, a distinguished family of pureblood Garleans, he joined the military at the age of 16. There, he distinguished himself as a brilliant tactician and statesman, eventually attaining the rank of legatus. But whatever future that bright young man may have had was lost. At some point before the founding of the Garlean Empire, the Asian Emmet Selk took over Solus's body and would control it for the rest of his life. The possessed Solus learned of the newly invented ceruleum engine and saw its combat potential. His creation of magitech weapons allowed the Garleans to conquer northern Ilsabard and win over the subjugated peoples. In the wake of his victory, Solus was granted control of Garlemald as dictator by popular support. Though they had been scorned by the other races for generations, at last the Garlean people had found a power strong enough to bring the other nations to their knees. Garlemald devastated the small country of Nelmask before conquering the south of Ilsabard. During this time, Solus proclaimed himself emperor, adding the honorary title of Zos into his name and founding the Garlean Empire. The empire would go on to conquer Doma, Dalmasca, and the city-state of Alamigo. In an attempt to make the world itself bow before them, their unleashing of the moon Dalamud and in turn, the primal Bahamut imprisoned within it, would instead lead to the 7th Umbral Calamity. In recent days, however, many of these subjugated nations have pried their freedom from the Empire's vicious grasp. Let's return now to the outskirts of Garlemald and work our way inwards. The stretch of icy land to the southwest of the city is called the Eblan Rime. In Final Fantasy IV, Eblan, also known as Eblana, is a kingdom bearing the same name. It's ruled by a clan of ninja, with their most powerful being the playful Edge, the Prince of Eblan. Much of Garlemald's naming and societal structures reflect inspiration drawn from our real-world Roman Empire. It seems of particular note, then, that of the many locations in Garlemald, this is one of the few with a name outside of those conventions. Unusual naming aside, the cold climate of the area itself undoubtedly causes a rime of frost to line the windows of every outpost and building throughout its expanse. But unlike most of the abandoned stretch of open tundra, Camp Broken Glass shows a flicker of life. Despite its name, the populated camp stationed beyond the city's smoking husk seems thankfully intact. Soldiers of the Alliance keep their skills sharp beneath a dark sky. The familiar armored forms of Ishgardian soldiers stand stationed outside the huddle of buildings. Doman forces adjust their garments against the biting wind. The center of Camp Broken Glass sports an unusual aetheryte. A vaguely Charlian device is exposed within the broken crystal. At the base and middle are what appear to be Garlean-made braces, which begs the question: did the Empire adapt aetheryte technology to allow non-magical Garleans to use them? Or were these meant for non-Garlean members of the Empire, such as conquered peoples or foreign merchants? Could it be that this and the other aetheryte on the map were repaired or rigged for use by the Alliance after the destruction of Garlemald? We can only hope our allies are moving in to provide stability and aid to the region. The interiors of the buildings are sparse, though interestingly enough, none of the windows appear to have been blown out from the explosive force that leveled the city. If they were, they have since been repaired. Traveling through the Eblan Rime, it's probable that you'll find yourself passing by a Horrea Campi. A horreum, plural horrea, was a type of public warehouse used during the ancient Roman period. Although the Latin term is often used to refer to granaries, Roman horrea were used to store many other types of consumables. The giant Horrea Galbae in Rome were used not only to store grain, but also olive oil, wine, foodstuffs, clothing, and even marble. The storehouse isn't far from the nearby major roadway Alta Strata, which makes transporting and storing goods a streamlined process. The Alta Strata is the name of an elevated roadway running through the outer limits of the city to its center. When planning the architecture of the city, Garlemald appears to have been built with verticality in mind, and shows remnants of both overpasses and skyways amidst the wreckage. In the case of the Alta Strata, this made it possible for traffic to continue without interrupting the pedestrians or many buildings that once sprawled beneath it. It likely also optimized the limited amount of buildable terrain nestled between the northern peaks of Ilsebard. Alta is a Latin word meaning high or lofty, while strata is the plural form of a geological term meaning a layer of rock or soil that is distinct from those above or below it. The terminology originates from the older Latin stratum, more generally meaning something spread or laid down. To the southeast, however, the markers of civilization thin out, leaving only industrial machinery amidst the white-clad ceruleum fields. These Latin words, Cerulea Ingens, or possibly Cerulea Ingens, roughly translate to the vast or great blue. Beneath the icy, unassuming crust that covers this region of Garlemald, a volatile blue ocean of ceruleum roils. This provides a wellspring of energy to the nearby city and the Empire as a whole. Ceruleum is a powerful yet highly unstable source of energy used by the Garlean Empire to power magitech engines. The Empire consumes vast amounts of it to power anything from airships to armored tanks to passenger trains. In contrast, Eorzea mostly uses ceruleum to power airship technology and little else. This is likely due to the Eorzeans' magical innovations, and also their lack of access to the resource. Though ceruleum is abundant on the continent of Ilsebard, deposits are only found in Eorzea in a small swath of northern Thanalan, making the Garlean Empire the greatest supplier of this precious resource in the known world. To make the extraction and distribution of ceruleum possible, the Garleans developed advanced facilities throughout their ceruleum-rich lands, including Juturna Platform G. Juturna was an ancient Roman goddess of fountains, wells, and springs, who in some myths was turned by Jupiter into a water nymph and given several sacred wells. It stands to reason then that the well of ceruleum beneath the platform may itself be known as Juturna, and that there are at the very least a set of platforms labeled A through F located in other locations around its expanse, making it considerable in size indeed. The unassuming nearby facility, Monitoring Station G, likely ensures the operations and handling of this highly valuable and highly dangerous resource don't endanger the nearby capital city. This once prosperous industry has slowed considerably in recent days. Not long after the assassination of the previous emperor Varus Zosgalvus, the empire descended into civil war. With Varus' son Xenos showing little inclination to take the throne after his death, the imperial legions tore Garlemald apart in their efforts to achieve their own interests, and subsequently the city fell under Telophoroi control, causing the price for ceruleum to shoot up all across Eorzea. This instability has certainly affected the ceruleum workers, or perhaps pilferers, who huddle in the light of a ceruleum fire within the tapper's den. The lack of proper facilities for their work calls into doubt such a cave being used for legal means, but very little is as it normally would be in Garlemald, and it could be they're simply seeking respite. Let's set aside talk of industry, and journey north of the vast blue to the country houses of Garlemald's elite. Regio Domorum means country houses in Latin, and is a stretch of land where those with means can maintain a country estate. While only one such retreat is situated upon Garlemald's map, it's known that many of the imperial court have decadent houses in the country to escape city life. In ancient Rome, wealthy families were also likely to have their own country villas. These sprawling estates allowed for much larger and more comfortable lodgings than their city residences. They had multiple rooms that typically included servants' quarters, courtyards, baths, pools, storage rooms, exercise rooms, and gardens. The scale of this particular country home seems humble when considering the possibilities history presents to us, and in regards to a member of the royal line living here, the chances seem small. All the same, the covered veranda manages to look inviting, even amidst the downfall of ash and snow, reminding those who wander through that not all that long ago, laughter may have been heard through the villa's courtyard, while a family enjoyed a turn in the countryside. But while some might wish to get away from the city, we will at last set foot in what remains of it. Regio Urbanissima implies that this area of Garlemald is not only an urban area, but the most urban area, thanks to the issima at the end of urban. Certainly, the smoking ruins imply a sense of grandiose scale, even as the terrible loss of civilization and life began to sink in. Packs of Magitech and other Garlean hybrids wander the streets devoid of their masters. Abandoned cars lie buried beneath the weight of fallen buildings. A flock of levitating drones, colloquially called bits, have been hacked by an unknown source, their targeting parameters modified to attack any living thing that dares enter the imperial capital. Garlemald is no longer a city for the living, and yet, signs of the life that once inhabited it remain. In the heart of the Regio Urbanissima are the shattered remnants of the Palatium Novum, or New Palace. It was previously understood that all members of the royal family dwelled within the extravagant Imperial Palace in Garlemald, and had decadent villas outside the city. How or why this new palace was constructed is uncertain. What we do know are the details of the current royal line and the family that directed Garlemald's fate. The royal family composes the imperial court, and are all of the line of Galvus. In addition to Zos, a title reserved for the emperor, the term Ye refers to all male members of the royal family in the line of succession, as well as the emperor's wife and mother. There also exists the title of Weir, or those who have no claim to the throne, such as female heirs and their spouses. Even before the catastrophe that struck the city, the political climate of Garlemald was tense. The instability began 5 years after the calamity. The Ascian-possessed Solius remained the official ruler of the empire, but decided to exit the world stage by allowing his corporeal form to die of old age. News of the emperor's failing health and subsequent death incited political strife within the empire over who would succeed him. As he'd named no heir, a civil war broke out in the capital city of Garlemald. Solus's grandson, Varus Ye Galvus, pitted himself against his uncle, Titus Ye Galvus, who was one of Solus's still living sons. Varus presumably killed him in the war for succession to secure his claim, though Titus is survived by his son, Nerva, who led the Third Imperial Legion for many years. Ultimately, it was Varus who seized control, but unfortunately for the newly crowned emperor, his new position would illuminate the shadow behind Garlemald's throne. All his life, Varus had believed his people had overcome their own weakness to seize unbelievable strength, with his own bloodline spearheading their rise to power. This belief was never put to the test until that very same man reappeared from the grave and told him everything he'd built his life on was a lie. The glorious Garlean Empire had been nothing more than the pawn of an immortal entity known as an Ascian, masquerading as his legendary predecessor. Still, Varus was more like his grandfather than he cared to admit. His son, Zenos Iagalvus, was brought up being taught all that an imperial heir was expected to learn. He spent little time with his father, and his mother sickened and died shortly after he was born. Varus and Zenos often went months without seeing one another, and to the youth, his tutors and servants provided little in the way of friendship. When he gained a new swordmaster, he was beaten daily by the man, yet his father allowed it to continue as a way to build his son's strength. The swordsman taught him the unyielding blade technique, and although the training was brutal, Zenos began to connect with something and someone for the first time in his life. It wouldn't last. The boy's trainer secretly yearned to take the life of Zenos' father, as his family was being held hostage to ensure he would train the prince. Varus was so determined to make his son worthy of the Empire's strength that he'd ensured Zenos be given the most highly skilled master available, whether that master wanted to teach him or not. The swordsman first attempted to kill Varus' son, but Zenos' training had paid off. In their confrontation, Zenos took the life of his teacher and found himself strangely numb. This experience left Zenos bleak, wishing to recapture that feeling of connection he'd so briefly experienced and desirous of an opponent that wouldn't inevitably fall to his blade. Not even his own father would prove to be an adversary that could reignite such a spark. After Zenos' defeat in Alamigo at the hands of the Warrior of Light, and a brief stint with his resurrected body being used as an Ascian vessel, Zenos slaughtered his way into the Imperial throne room and struck down his father. Zenos didn't take the throne for himself, but his cousin Nerva may have claimed the title. At the very least, Nerva seemingly tried to hold a semblance of peace in the capital for a time, but what has happened to him since is unknown. Just beyond the wreckage of the Palatium Novum lies a space far removed from the political intrigues of the royal line, a place for the common people of Garlemald, the Forum Solius. The Roman Forum, also known by its Latin name Forum Romanum, was surrounded by several important ancient governmental buildings at the center of the city of Rome. Citizens of the ancient city referred to this space, originally a marketplace, as the Forum Magnum, or simply the Forum. The Forum was the teeming heart of ancient Rome, and has been called the most celebrated meeting place in the world. I can only imagine the Forum Solius has earned its moniker post-destruction, meaning the lonely or solitary forum. It could indicate that it's the only forum in the entire city, but given the presence of the Forum Patens, such a guess wouldn't seem accurate. Instead, the name evokes the same imagery that confronts us now: an ash-covered city directory, the mournful pool, and the empty swing sets where children once played. Only steps from the forum that once would have welcomed those arriving by underground train is the Tertium. New arrivals to Garlemald may once have been just as numerous as departures, but those huddled in the dimly lit station seek only to depart. Reminiscent of our subways, the underground station called the Tertium was spared the obliteration the surface underwent and now offers refugees safe harbor. Tertium is a Latin word meaning the third. Much as we have different lines or routes in our public transportation, it could be that the third is a reference to the station or to the line itself that runs through this structure. A reflection to its counterpart on the eastern side of the map, the Forum Patens is situated to the west on a small hill just outside the city. Forum Patens translates to open forum, and in a loose sense, this term can be used to describe any space in which people may exchange information and ideas. In the United States, for example, most government-owned public property is an open forum. In that forum, citizens can protest, hold meetings, and exercise other rights. The everyday citizen of Garlemald may have made use of this forum to share their opinions. Most of them, however, were unlikely to be able to alter the direction of Garlemald's future. This responsibility belonged to the Senate, whose meeting chambers are in the Senaculum Imperialis. The Senate once ruled Garlemald during the days of the Republic, and while it has since diminished in authority, it still served in an advisory role to the Emperor and his court after the founding of the Empire. The word Senate derives from the Latin word senex, which means old man. The word thus means assembly of elders. Senaculum Imperialis roughly translates to the Imperial Senate. Members range from upper-level public officials who modify their names using the title Fey, to the highest-ranking Princeps Senatus, the leaders of the Senate, who use the title Il. The Senate also holds the power to remove magistrates. However, it had yet to use this power prior to the city's fall. Ancient Rome also had a Senate that likely followed a similar model to the body seen in Garlemald. When the Republic began, the Senate functioned as an advisory council that consisted of 300 to 500 senators who served for life. The Senate of the Roman Republic passed decrees called Senatus Consulta, which in form constituted advice from the Senate to a magistrate. While these decrees did not hold legal force, they were usually obeyed in practice. Since the 3rd century BC, the Senate also played a pivotal role in cases of emergency. The Senatus Consultum Ultimum, ultimate decree of the Senate, was a senatorial decree which authorized the consuls to employ any means necessary to solve the crisis. The Senaculum Imperialis still stands, but the senators that once roamed in its halls are nowhere to be seen. What authority can the citizens of Garlemald call on in their time of need? What is the Senate's ultimate decree in this time of crisis? Containing the monstrous structure that sets the backdrop for the ruined city is a stainless steel wall known as the Stainless Course. At one time, it appears as though vehicles were able to pass through this inner ring using the narrow tunnels along its length. This lends itself to the definition of a course, which is the route or direction followed by a ship, aircraft, road, or river. In a figurative sense, these words could also imply a blameless course of action, but considering the blood staining Garlemald's hands, there would truly be irony in such an interpretation. The northeastern outskirts of the city are home to a facility known only as the Enceladeum. In our world, Enceladus is tied to 2 possible references, one as the 6th largest moon of Saturn, and the other as the moon's namesake, a giant named Enceladus from Greek mythology. Enceladus was one of the giants who were the offspring of Gaia. They warred against Zeus and the other Olympian gods in the Gigantomachy, their epic battle for control of the cosmos. While there is no definitive connection between the Enceladeum and the Eblan Rime, the imagery Enceladus evokes, paired with the reference to Final Fantasy IV, does bring up a noteworthy parallel. In Final Fantasy IV, Eblan is a kingdom on the southwest island on Earth's overworld, which is located near the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel is a large tower that stretches from the Earth's underworld to the overworld, and is used to summon the Giant of Babel from the moon by collecting the crystals from both worlds and bringing them to the tower. Doing so calls forth the Giant, a machine of tremendous power so large it actually serves as a dungeon in the game. This act is what dooms the world. Now, the nation that once strove to weaponize even the heavens themselves lies in ruin. The empty streets are covered in rubble and ash, a reminder of the Roman proverb derived from the Latin Bible, Qui gladio ferit, gladio perit. He who wounds by the sword, dies by the sword. Thus concludes our tour of Garlemald. Again, I'm Rook, and it was my pleasure to be your lore-obsessed tour guide today. When you're able to visit in person, this haunting, desolate landscape will undoubtedly leave its mark. Until then, only the roving packs of Magitech beasts will stalk these streets, awaiting adventurers from far and wide to come and uncover the answers to Garlemald's downfall for themselves. Be sure to tip your tour guide by liking or subscribing, and thank you so much for listening! If you enjoyed the content, check out the rest of my Endwalker Media Tour playlist, which also includes coverage of new features, jobs, glamour, and lore tours of Old Charlian and Thavnair. A huge thank you as well to Square Enix for this opportunity, and a reminder, all footage shown in this video is still in development and subject to change. Visit Garlemald for yourself when Endwalker releases, coming November 23rd, 2021, with early access starting November 19th.